Good evening. Good evening. Everyone has a story, and our story is not contingent upon what happens in our lives. The good things, the bad things, the ups and downs. Social status doesn't matter, our age, whether we're rich or poor, how much we weigh, our success or our lack thereof by the world's standards. Whether we have it all together, any standard of perfection that we might strive for. Does it have anything to do with our race, our background, our education, our past successes, or our past failures? My story is a little bit messy. Kind of put this up here to just kind of give you a little peek into the types of stuff that I have to deal with. Some of the more difficult stuff, but it's not unusual or original. Some of you could probably just move some of the categories around a little bit, or take one away and add one, and it would end up being a picture of what it's like to be you. People's lives are ordinary, and they're extraordinary at the same time, because we all have challenges, and we all face them, and find a way to get through them. And it ends up being something pretty beautiful, and it ends up being this thing that we call a story. So I'm a real-life person with real-life problems, and I have issues, lots and lots and lots of them. I have ups and downs and in-betweens, and if I had to guess, just like you, I want my story to make a difference. So, who's the author of our story? I believe there's one common denominator. We all have the experience of a higher power, something that's fueling us, giving us hope, urging us to love, and giving us that deep desire to have our stories matter. I believe this is a spiritual experience, and I believe it's the backbone of every person's story, whether they believe in God or not, regardless of how they define God. There's that energy, there's that passion, and that comes from somewhere, and the locus, I do not believe, is from us ourselves, but from a power beyond ourselves. And because that power is there, it's significant, because it tells us that our life stories have value and are actually worth sharing. I believe that there are ways that we experience God through the love of others, in receiving grace and mercy from those around us, by being understood and affirmed, and by hearing about the experiences of others like you. And the way that happens is by experience. However we define God, we know him by experience. And one of the primary ways that we have this spiritual experiences is through the process of sharing our stories. And I was thinking in the car on the way here about the Bible and how Jesus spoke in stories. In the Old Testament, it's just story after story after story. And not all the stories are, pretty. Job raged at God. Moses had his moments. The only person that had the stories right was Jesus Christ, right? But he spoke to us in stories, and I think he was trying to tell us something about the power of stories. And now we walk the earth with the power of the Holy Spirit in us. So I think it's right and good to believe that the Holy Spirit can do something with our lives and give us a story that has power and that's valuable and has something to say to somebody. Our lives are spiritual. Our lives are spiritual, our stories are spiritual, and our stories are way bigger than we often give them credit to be. My story, I wrote it down, I put it in a book. It's called Dancing in the Doghouse. And it falls under the genre of spiritual autobiography or spiritual memoir. Big fancy words to say, telling my story from a spiritual perspective. Dancing in the Doghouse is about the spirituality of my life in a broken body, in a broken world, and the spirituality of finding hope and then sharing it. Simple. I'd like to share a time when I needed hope, but I didn't have much hope. And there's a point to this, and I'm going to read what's up on the screen, and then I'm going to talk about what that means in terms of sharing our own stories. I wrote, I keep thinking the two words, I'm done. I tell Jesus, I am done. Everyone who really knows me has heard me speak the words, I'm done. I'm done because I've reached out for help, and I've gotten worse. I'm also done because I just am. For some reason, I just can't bear it all anymore. Being awake all night leaves me sick, and then I'm sick all day long. I really met with the darkest place that I have ever known. This place is way worse than some of the places that I've been. Those places were bad, but this place is really the bottom. Everything feels like that, and I wonder if my life is worth living. That may make some people uncomfortable, but when you really think about it, who do you know whether at some point in their lives been done? Sometimes life gets really hard and really bad, and these are the times when we want our story to make sense and to make a difference because it all feels so senseless. And I was thinking, it's really an irony. Because if I was just living my life and everything was good and wonderful and God was blessing me and, I'm just getting the bounty, who wants to hear that story? Because when you're struggling and you've got that person around you who's going, oh, everything's just going to be fine, that's not reality living. And who knows that person? That person who just has it going great all the time, every day, all their lives? That person is probably in denial. And it's not really the way that it happens. We release the power of our stories by digging around for the hope and then sharing it. I met this woman recently, and I didn't know if she was going to come, and she didn't. And so I'm recording this, so I can still get her to listen. She had a very devastating thing happen in her life. She had a beautiful daughter, I believe 21 years of age, honor roll. She's a figure skater, doing double axels, working on her triples. Beautiful. I looked at a picture of this girl, beautiful girl. At 21, she decides to try some recreational drugs. And she's one of the unlucky ones because she's only dabbling. And she gets something that's based with something. I don't know all the details, but it ends up that it has basically fried a part of her brain. And so this young girl is now 23 years old, and her brain is like, it's just not working the same as it used to. She's having trouble reading, having trouble concentrating, she's having all kinds of emotional problems. The drugs set off all kinds of things in her brain that just have life just not working for her. But think about the power. If she were to pull it together and say, you know what, this happened to me is a terrible thing, but I can speak into the lives of all the other 21-year-old kids that might try and do this. I could be a sign to them that it's not worth the risk. And she could, in the devastation, find the irony that now her life has more power than it ever has. So where do we find the hope when we find ourselves saying, I'm done, and when life gets hard, and life gets really bad, and we're looking for that spiritual backbone, when we're experiencing the pain and confusion of life? I'd like to share with you where I found the hope. I'll read, and then I'll share about why I think this is significant in terms of digging around and looking for that hope. I wrote, today my story is simple. I see how small I am and how little I have to give. It's a gritty, messy, and often humiliating story. I've been stripped of every big dream or every expectation I've ever had for myself or my life. I'm nothing, but I still share. You'd think that today my story has no power, but that's not true. People are comforted and encouraged by the story of my life. They're comforted by the stories of God's presence in my most unexpected, ordinary, and difficult places. Because their story is much like mine. They start to share, and God reaches us at the bottom of it all. So our lives have power regardless of the condition. And even at our lowest moments, we have something to share. And God works through us in our lives, and he is the author. He's the one that allows stuff to happen, doesn't necessarily cause it, but he allows it, and then he turns it around and makes it powerful. And he will connect our lives to the lives of others. We don't even have to figure out how that's going to happen. I don't know what I'm doing here tonight. I don't know where it's going. You know, maybe just one person whose life has changed. I have no idea. I just come and share, and I let him do the rest. And we can all do that. He doesn't just do it for me or for the famous people. It's God's people going out and sharing. I'd like to give you 7 reasons to share. There's way more than 7. I am not creative enough to come up with all of them. But here's a couple. Firstly, our story can make a difference. To give and to receive hope. To offer love and understanding. And to allow God to simply work through our lives. I looked up the definition of love in a dictionary. And it said, affectionate concern for the well-being of others. And I thought about that in the context of story sharing. Like, what does it mean to share? What am I really doing? Am I just, talking about something and it doesn't mean something to somebody else? How many times have you had somebody tell you something and it deeply affected you? And you carried it with you for the next day, the next month, the next year, for the rest of your life. And you never know when it's going to happen. And that person has no idea they're doing it. They're just sharing the ins and outs of their day, something that happened to them once. Sharing our stories is an opportunity to love our neighbor. We tell our story in response to someone's pain or need, and we are loving them. More reasons to share, to make sense of our own story, to better understand the spiritual aspects of our own lives, and to connect our lives to the lives of others. And I think that trusting God is a lot of it. How do we do it? We show up and we just make ourselves available and willing. And I'd like to read this as an example of how it happens. It's something that I wrote in my own book. It says, my spot awaits me and I'm glad it's there. Sharing my journey will always be one of the greatest opportunities of my life. Receiving the journeys of others will always be one of life's greatest gifts to me. I look forward to giving and receiving. I look forward to returning, learning, and sharing. I anticipate our lives intersecting. God assures me that we will be encouraged, touched, and healed by the common threads of our daily lives. I am certain that our ordinary lives will be touching lives for as long as we are willing to take our spot at the table and share. So how do we do it? As long as we are willing, and in the capacity that we can do it. God is able, and our story will touch the lives of others. This is the business that he's in. It's what he does. He didn't make us and give us a life in order for it to not reach and touch others. He wants us in relationship. He wants us sharing stories. He wants us encouraging each other. And we can trust him. We can trust him to tell our story where and